Hey, Mike, thank you for coming on the show today. I appreciate you finding some time. I know you shuffled a few things around to get here. So I really appreciate you taking the time to join us today and share your knowledge.
Appreciate it. Thanks for the invite, Adam. I think we've crossed or have known of each other for quite some time, so it's great to connect and happy to be on.
Great, man. This is going to be good. I think we're going to focus more on the soccer side, although I want the audience to know that it's not where you live and that it's not all you know. But for the sake of this, I'm really keen to kind of jump back into that with you. So before we do that, could you give a little background to, what's your origin story? How did you get to opening up the athletic lab in North Carolina and then also working with the NC Courage out of the NWSL?
Yeah, so I went through the traditional pathway of degrees, bachelor's degree in sport and kinesiology, a master's in coaching science, PhD in biomechanics and physiology. All the while, I knew I wanted to be a coach. I like the high performance side, but I like to blend the sports science. So I've worked or worn hats as a peer reviewed researcher and in academia a little bit while coaching, but coaching was always my passion. High performance was always my passion. Was primarily a track and field athletics kind of strength and conditioning coach or coach, period. I coached at the NCAA level and elite level in the sport of track and field for many years, won a couple national championships with LSU, have some fantastic mentors in Dan Paff and Boo Schexnader, who are legends and maybe familiar names to those who are in the speed power development space. And I left some coaching jobs, NCAA coaching jobs in track and field, to open Athletic Lab in 2009. It was the brainchild of myself and a business partner of mine that we started this company back when we were in our doctoral program. But we took some time to actually open it about 4 or 5 years later when the stars kind of aligned. Turned out that he couldn't really join me in opening it, but I ended up pushing the pedal to the metal and opening it in North Carolina, sight unseen, never really stepped foot in the state of North Carolina before other than maybe a layover. It checked off a lot of boxes in terms of the location, and it was kind of almost a profit-like type of thing that I'm kind of proud of because the area has really boomed over the past 15 years since we've been here. So we opened up in 2009 in an odd chance of fate. We completely were bootstrapping the company. We're in a small little warehouse. It's basically just myself. My wife was helping me out a bit and had only elite track and field athletes training with us. We didn't have anybody else. If you know anything about track and field, that is to say that we weren't really doing much business at all because track and field is a poverty sport. They can't pay a lot. They don't make a lot. Everyone involved just does it for their love of the sport. And but in some of these cases, the athletes had to pay through what I'd call sweat equity, meaning they were working for me a little bit, and most of them weren't really coaches or anything else. So I had some of these athletes go around and put flyers on cars, and they managed to put a flyer on the car of a pro soccer club in the area, second division. And this club, this head coach, called me up. He said, "Hey, I got a flyer on my car, which is actually illegal in this area, to solicit via flyers on a car." And he said, "But we are looking for somebody. We've just gotten rid of our strength and conditioning coach, and we need somebody to fill in the role." Now, at the time, I really did not know very much at all about soccer. I joke, but this is actually serious, that I could not have told you how many people were on the pitch at one time if you had asked me in 2009. I had no idea. I knew you got to kick the ball in the back of the net. I didn't know any positions. I probably couldn't have told you how long a match was. A very quick understudy of what was necessary to compete in the sport. The positions, the number of players, all this kind of basic stuff. But even then, my first year with this club, honestly, I just trained the crap out of these players. Like, I trained them really hard. I was coming from a track and field background. I trained a lot of bobsledders to elite international status, some Olympic weightlifters. So I came from and had worked with a couple of American football players as well from LSU and elsewhere. So really hard-nosed sports with a really big training culture where, it's okay to be sore. It's okay to lift heavy weights. You got to sprint all the time. It's okay to be, on the fringe of being sick from doing hard conditioning sessions. So that was my background. That was like actually what I was accustomed to as an athlete, as a coach up until that point. All very hard-nosed sports. I'd not worked in the sport of soccer at all. My first gig is a second division men's pro team. Kind of took it to heart. We really didn't even get paid that first year. This just kind of gave us some marketing advertisement and allowed us to be on the pitch and et cetera. But what I did was I trained the crap out of these guys for that first year. We immediately saw a huge difference at that second division of the U.S. level. We did really well, and people noticed we were, faster, fitter, stronger. It was a transformation of the team, and we won a league championship that year. We did it again the following year. We had the highest goal scorer on the men's side on the second year and across all levels of North American soccer. And this caught some attention. After 2 years with this second division club, ended up getting a handful of job offers in the MLS. I ended up taking one of them, which is where we have kind of, third degree know each other, and worked in Vancouver for 2 years. My thought at the time was actually that I would take this Vancouver Whitecaps MLS job, do it for about 2 years, 3 years at the most, and maybe just use it as a proof of concept that this athletic lab methodology could be transferred to a team-like setting and that we could produce wins. So this mix of sports science and a hard training culture would work well, similar to what Exos had been doing and maybe a couple other organizations. It didn't really pan out like that because people or teams or organizations, at least up until that point in time, really were just looking for me to work with them. We weren't large enough as a company for the athletic lab methodology to be as accepted as kind of a third-party provider. But I spent some time in Vancouver, enjoyed my time there. It was the first Canadian team to make the MLS playoffs. We had the largest swing, I believe, at the time, or one of them, from losing season to a winning season in terms of points. In my first year there, won a the Cascadia Cup my second year there. We were not dominating by any means, but we had a massive turnaround for a young franchise. Enjoyed my time there. And then after 2 years, I loved Vancouver. I loved working in that setting, but I basically had athletic lab back at home. It wasn't neglected by any means, but I needed to return. So I came back after 2 years, continued to kind of help Vancouver a little bit after I had left from afar, and then started to rework with Athletic Lab, take control over that again. Within about a year or two, the men's team that I had left behind hired me back again to work with the team. And then about a year or two after that, that club purchased the North Carolina Courage, a young NWSL team. And a week before the season starts, the club says to me, the men's fitness coach, hey, we just purchased this women's team. The league is requiring that we send every team have a representative at the U.S. NWSL sports science meeting. And we're not under contract. I'm not paid anything for it at the time, or for, the women's team didn't even have anything set in stone, in terms of, so go and join that. And over the next 2 or 3 years, I gradually phased out of the men's role, which was kind of a part-time role. Definitely wasn't with them all the time. And then into exclusively with the women over the past 3 years, which has been a lot of fun. It's been an opportunity to kind of really set a culture in place. I've now been with the team for 8 years. We've been very successful over that time span. It's an unbelievable training culture. As you know, having worked in soccer, that the culture of hard work, being hardworking, or really getting players to buy in or train hard across a 30-person roster can sometimes be a little difficult. I've heard stories of coaches not buying into their sports science or strength and conditioning coach staff, but I've never had that problem. I've always had full buy-in. I've always had with our staff, and that's likewise helped with the players. It's allowed me to help establish a culture, so it's a lot of fun to work with this group. And the league has gone from, if I'm being honest, something like amateurish bush league kind of thing when I first started 8 years ago. I went to that first NWSL sports science meeting, and I think I'm fresh off of an off season of consults with a couple Premier League clubs and some Spanish club and Korean and South American clubs, and I'm seeing all these big clubs. And I go to this sports science meeting, and there at the meeting there's someone there who's like a YMCA desk attendant, and I'm like, what the heck is going on here? This is the top women's league in the world right now, and they have someone in place here who is not really qualified, and I don't know, this person may have been on the pathway to something bigger and better, but they weren't what we would consider a professional that would be suitable for that level of play. Now, in the 8 years since then, man, it's the growth, the professionalism has escalated exponentially. Like, I am not aware of any league that has grown in the financial power, in the player power, in the professionalism, everything about it so quickly. When you think about these other burgeoning leagues, WNBA is 20, 30 years on, and they're probably going to be behind the NWSL if they're not already. And I think NWSL actually has a chance to be not like a secondary league. A lot of people kind of, when I first started, almost turned up their nose and thought, oh, it's a women's league, it's not that big a deal. Do they get paid? That kind of thing. You guys play in stadiums? I'd get those kind of questions. And now there's 20,000 people at a game, and the growth for the NWSL is probably faster than the MLS. Like, MLS is clearly far ahead, but they've got a 30, 40-year head start. And I really do see that NWSL could be the one women's league in the world, or maybe women's soccer in general, could be the one women's sport in the world where it can match its male counterparts, especially in the U.S., where we don't have the huge soccer culture like, say, Spain or England or Italy. So, yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Had zero soccer background to start, and now I've kind of like a lot of people only know me as a soccer fitness coach or a soccer performance director. I still work in track and field. I've got, guys that have made national teams as late as last year. Run my own track and field club as a nonprofit out of Athletic Lab. Have increasingly worked in basketball over the past 4 years or so, which is kind of one of my loves as a younger athlete. I'm not a tall guy. Was reasonably athletic, but not a tall guy. My basketball career died very, very early. But I have always loved the sport and have increasingly worked in it, juggling that kind of secondarily to working with the Courage over the past 8 years.
Since you started over the last 8 years, do you have any favorite memories or core memories working with the Courage in that time? Because you alluded at the early part, it was next to nothing. And like you said, I mean, Tennessee Courage just opened up their own stadium. You've had the crazy investors like Angel City and San Diego. So just really curious, like over the span, have any memories you'd like to share with?
Well, we had a couple years span there where it was just unbelievable to be a part of it. We hadn't quite hit the massive growth or tipping point of the league. I think we're now past the tipping point where the league could fail. They've got a massive TV deal and all these stadiums, as you say. But so I started with the club in 16. We won the Shield that year, went to the championship, had a lot of injuries that we ended up losing the championship. But could have made a great case for us being obviously the best team that league year. The next 2 years, though, man, it was just a wild ride. We basically didn't lose. I think of from this perspective of other sports, you're talking about like, I don't know, the Chicago Bulls in this. You're talking about, like the Golden State Warriors. You're talking about the Patriots. Like we were that dominating over players. So during that span, it was kind of wild because I remember being in the midst of that. And we had one season where we played about 28 games and we only lost once. So, which in the sport of soccer is basically unheard of. You'll sometimes hear 28 game win streaks in maybe like college basketball or, maybe the NBA. But even then it's pretty rare. But in soccer, it's unheard of. So we lost one game and it was kind of a fluky kind of goal that cost us the game. But during that time span, and especially looking back, you see how absurd this is, we'd be down in games. It'd be the second half and we were down by 3. This happened maybe 2 or 3 times. We're down by 1 or 2. We're down by 2 with 10 minutes to go. And instead of thinking like, man, this sucks. How are we going to get these 2 goals? The thought process is like, I wonder how much we're going to win by. That was genuinely the thought during that time span because it was so improbable, unlikely that we would lose, and so likely that, especially during those last 10, 15 minutes, we were going to just throw a couple goals in the back of the net. So there's that stretch there where we were really dominant, physically dominant, scoring a lot of goals. It was a time period where probably the talent in the country wasn't really diluted. We were developing players that went on to national teams. It was just a lot of fun. We have gone from busing to games to chartering occasionally. So that there's like this evolution has been so incredibly fast. More recently, we won back-to-back Challenge Cup championships, and that was a lot of fun to be able to kind of defend that. It was kind of an in-season tournament kind of thing where it was unique and special because much like in-season tournaments in our sport, you're oftentimes not playing your top teams or your top lineup, and when we play teams, if our second team plays other teams' second teams, we tend to do really well. And it's not because we're necessarily so incredibly talented. Person is, the end all and be all. And we're also incredibly bought into this drive towards excellence, toward no one's bigger than the team, a physical culture where every single person is incredibly fit, strong, and fast. No one sulks around. So during those 2 heyday years, we won one of them, we won the Shield, we won the championship, we won the ICC championship, beating clubs like Man City and Lyon, and with it was our second team versus their first team. So those are kind of memories you stick with you. It's cool to have like your first team out there and you're dominating but even when the people that kind of would normally sit on the bench can come in and hang tight with anybody, which is what happens, say, during the Olympics or during the World Cup. We won our Challenge Cups largely off the backs of people that were playing, were our second string, while our first string was out at the Olympics or the World Cup. And then when our first string comes back, they might win the championship, but we didn't get to the championship with them. We got to the championship truly as this team-wide effort where everyone was bought in, everyone contributed. When we won the ICC championship, it was people who didn't see the field for much of the whole year played in the ICC championship against Man City and Lyon, and they're getting a chance, and it's a really good testament to the thing we try to impress upon players all the time is that you can't control when you get a chance, but you can control what you do when you are given that opportunity, and you have to be prepared for when that opportunity inevitably comes, and our players buy into that. We train incredibly hard. There's a very high standard, technically, tactically, and of course physically. And I think it shows. We have never really been bad. I think that's a good testament to our culture, is that if you can have perennial success, we might not be the best all the time, but if you can have perennial sustained success, it's indicative of the culture that is built, of the infrastructure and the people who are involved at the top, where it really says, okay, it doesn't matter if you have an MVP or not. It doesn't matter, if these players get traded or not. It's all about the system. So yeah, I mean, those two years were fantastic. The winning the back-to-back Challenge Cup, really cool. The bubble was like we were in the Challenge Cup bubble, or the NWSL bubble, and during COVID times, which feels like another world almost. It was fun. We were actually probably one of our most dominating relative to our competition teams coming off the back of those two championship years. And we ended up losing what I would think is like a little bit of fluky goal again. But again, that's the way the sport goes. And we got knocked out. But yeah, I mean, it's been a great ride that I'm very grateful to have been a part of.
I'd like to echo how challenging it is to go 2 years. That whole season is only one game, especially when you're playing multiple tournaments across. And the other thing too is the soccer season's long. You play one game a week, so sometimes a 4-game winning streak is a month, whereas like a 4 or 5, 6-game winning streak in other sports may be over the course of a week or so, which you can kind of ride that emotional high. But in the world of soccer, that emotional high sometimes goes away over the course of a week, or if you have a bye week. So I just want to echo how impressive that was during that time period. I'm really curious on this one question, because I heard you reference culture, I heard you reference hard work, I heard you reference the fact that your second team is beating first team, which has to be a testament to culture, has to be a testament to fitness. So really curious on this question. If you could define the culture of what's manifested it, the courage over the last, let's say, 3 to 5 years, are there 3 to 5 words you would choose that defines that culture?
Nosed, bought in, relentless pursuit of excellence, I think would all kind of come to mind. People that don't buy in don't last very long here, for a variety of reasons, some of which are kind of pragmatic, right? The train doesn't really slow down for you to get on it. So if you haven't prepared, or if you're lazy or whatever, you're going to get hurt, or you're just not ever going to be given a chance. We'll build you up to speed, of course, but you have to be bought into the process. Yeah, it's been very unique. I have, as I said, I take none of this for granted, but I was handed the keys when I took that first job in 2009. I was basically headhunted for the position in Vancouver, and was again handed the keys to do whatever I want. I came back, and while the coach that I worked for at the start of my time with the Courage was very suspect of me, it bought in within a couple months, and especially over the past 6 years, could have full trust and faith of the coaching staff and the players. So it makes a huge difference when you have that. I speak with a lot of coaches and who are really smart, and they can't even they can't impact their team in the way that I've been lucky enough to, largely because I don't have to deal with a coach that doesn't believe in fitness and conditioning and strength training and all of that. So, we really do have a good setup here where the coach and even top to bottom, our administration believes in what we do. The players are all in. I I have the full faith of the players. If other places, I know if we walked out sore on a Wednesday before a Saturday match, you hear those coaches might be like reprimanded for it. But we have a culture where it's like, hey, we trust this process. We know what we're going to do. We train really hard. If Mike says put some more weight on the bar, we put more weight on the bar. There might be a little bit of joking here and there where people are like, oh man, what do we have today? That kind of thing. But everybody is full effort. It's really kind of a cool thing to see.
So with that, you develop the reputation across the league as one of the more fit organizations, for lack of better terms, right? You whispers coming out of the players, at the style of play that y'all have as well. So from a 10,000-foot view, what is the philosophy for that program to warrant that reputation?
I would say, in a nutshell, what we do is we pursue a very high training standard, progressively overloading over extended periods of time. A concept that I try to impress upon our coaching staff and our players is that my someone that's pulling the strings on all aspects of the training is to get players to bend but never break. And this is a little bit from my background in track and field and weightlifting and bobsleigh, where these are sports that are measured by centimeters and milliseconds, and whether you're successful or a failure. A kilogram is a kilo or two is the difference between a championship weightlifter or not. And in those sports, the things that we do really matter, right? Like there's no way around it. If you're not good at the stuff that we do, you're not good at the sport. And it's brutal in that way because you can see very effectively whether someone is good or not at what they do. You'll get the occasional talent who might succeed in spite of the training methodology, but overwhelmingly, the training methodology has to be on point for you to succeed over time. In the sport of track and field, with my post-collegiate groups, which is, again, where I started from, my post-collegiate, which you'd effectively call emerging elite. A lot of the times these guys they're not your blue chippers coming out of college. In fact, I've had around 20 athletes go to the USA Track and Field National Championships, Olympic trials, maybe 5 go to World Championships or Olympic Games. And of those athletes, I would say only one is a Division I talent. One. The rest are Division II and Division III. I've had 4 USA Track and Field national champions who are Division III athletes. So here's the thing. In track and field, if you're Division III, you're basically not as good as Division I. It's quantitative. You're quantitatively not as good, right? Otherwise, you would eventually be at Division I. There are levels to it. And while Division III is great, it's not Division I. There's no subjectiveness to the sport. It's very cut and dry. So I get these guys coming in from Division III levels. They wouldn't really even be able to compete in many cases at Division I. Sometimes they'd be like a lesser Division I type athlete. And they come in and whatever, regardless of their training protocol or their success in sport, what I say to them is like, hey, where are you guys? Where are you guys ranked relative to your goals? Where do you see yourself? Inevitably it's something like, oh, I'm 50th in the country. I'm 100th in the country. I'm 200 in the country. Like, okay. So right now you're telling me, I can see it on the charts, the list. You're 200th, you're 50th. There's 100 people ahead of you, whatever that is. If we did exactly what they do, Would you ever catch up? The answer is pretty simple. No, you wouldn't. Right? This person is already ahead of you. Think of it as two trains, right? If two trains are moving and one is ahead of the other and they're both moving at the same speed, the train that's behind is never going to catch up to the train that's in the front. So you've got to do something that's different. And maybe it's a little bit of like a little bit more volume or a little bit more intensity or a different training methodology. But at the end of the day, it's got to be something different if you're going to catch up to these people in front of you. And that's where the bend, don't break philosophy kind of came to mind is like, we have to train harder than these people in front of you, harder, smarter. Otherwise, how are we going to catch up? You're behind. We know that. It's quantitatively proven that you are behind. You're not going to catch up to these people ahead of you if you just do what they did. They're already ahead of you. You're just going to stay behind them. You might get better, but they're getting better too. So this basic philosophy of like, okay, we got to do something that's different. Train a little harder, train a little smarter. Bend, don't break. That's what pushes you forward. And, I'd be lying to you if I said, hey, I've not broken people. I've definitely broken people, but I've also got the Division III guys that were 200th in the country that have become represent Team USA or win national championships. And I've taken athletes who, in other sports who were, about to retire or about to, force retirement, not make a team, whatever it is. And now they are starting. Now they're all league. Now they're best 11. And of course, in sport of soccer, my role just plays a small portion of that. But what I do with the courage is really kind of make sure that philosophy is present throughout even the technical training. So this is where I say I have quite a bit of control with the team in terms of they trust me to say, hey, we need to train this much today. Or, usually it's me saying, hey, we need to do more today. Let's keep going. Let's not play 3/4 field 11v11. We need to play full field 11v11. Let's not play for 20 minutes. Let's play for 30 minutes. Okay, guys, technical staff, we didn't get what we needed out of this. I need to take these 12 players and run them on the side. And, as long as it's systemic, as long as it's progressive, as long as you're kind of looking backwards at what you've done, looking forwards at where you want to go, it's been very successful for us. And I think these past couple of years, we've probably done it as best as we've done it.
When you say bend, don't break, and and there's maybe some metrics you're looking at, or there's ways you're monitoring this process. Have you come across any, I guess I don't want to say come across like the holy grail because I don't think that exists, but what is the process of determining where you've bent them far enough where you do have to back off, or you haven't bent them enough where you can continue to push forward? Like that example you just said about, hey, I go to the coach, they want to play 20, I say 30. Hey, at the end of training, I say, hey, these 12 players need to do more. How do you determine when to bend before you break?
So it's actually been quite a long process in terms of developing the system that we have now. I'd say it started actually when I was in Vancouver, which was my first full-time role in a team sport. And when I was there, I created a load management system, and it could take in 20 different data streams. Obviously your GPS, your heart rate data, but wellness tracking, jump tracking. We would do force platform. We would do some metrics in the weight room. We would look at based off of research and time zone changes. We'd look at kind of a travel or a climate or an altitude load. So it's taking all of these different data streams, and it was like, at the time especially, and even now, what you sometimes see is like, oh, here's your GPS report and here's your wellness report, and these two things never see each other. That never made sense to me, especially coming from a sport of track and field where I could control everything. I say I could control how many meters we're going to sprint in a week, like down to 2 or 3%. They obviously have to decelerate and stuff like that, but I could say, hey, we're going to we're going to do 300 meters of sprint volume 3 times a week, and we could be spot on that. And in the sport of soccer or team sports in general, it's so chaotic you can't really do that. Well, I was trying to bring some structure to that, where I say, okay, like, how do we actually know whether these players are doing what we think they're doing? And as you know, there's huge variance within a given practice, sometimes based off of positional demands, sometimes based off of players' fitness or effort levels. It could be anywhere between 20 to 40% difference between the high and low person on the session in terms of various KPIs. So what I was trying to do was basically like put all these data streams in, look at it, effectively create an aggregation of them. It was like an early attempt at machine learning, where it could look at players on an individual basis and say, hey, this wellness score is normal for this player. But for this player, that same exact score is really horrible. So I was putting in what effectively was machine learning or low-level AI, some individualization qualities in there. And that has progressed over the years. In the past 3 years, I've really kind of taken that to another level with some machine learning and AI and individualization. It sits kind of on the backbone of like Tim Gabbett's, at least philosophy of acute to chronic workload ratio. I'm not wholly dependent on it or anything like that, but we get to know the players. And I don't mean conversationally. I mean, hey, what happens when we get this player to a 40K week? What does it look like if we sprint them, get 15 sprint entries on the week? These players can handle it. These players can't handle it. So the bend point for all athletes is not the same, but we try to take them right up into the cliff, and not push them over, so to speak. I try to get positional homogeneity in terms of like what their fitness levels are. I don't always get there, but I try really hard to get them to that, because over the years we've seen, as I'm sure many can attest, there are positional demands. For us, it's really clear. You have to have a certain physical output if you're going to play for us. It's almost a non-negotiable. Forwards they have a certain profile. We don't really have many exceptions to these profiles. So I could tell you like, hey, this is where you need to be. If you want to play, this is where you need to be. This is where all the players who start for us, they get to. And that's a really good sell for the subs or the non-rostered players, because I could show them the data. And then in terms of bringing it back to the bend, don't break ideas, like we're just constantly monitoring. It's a constant finger on the pulse, so to speak, whether that is, we do jump testing once a week now on force platforms. We do ISO mid-thigh pulls once every 4 weeks. We do wellness monitoring. That is individualized per person, looking at standard deviations of scores and how that tracks against their physical outputs. We have machine learning built into all of our player loading. So I know what someone has built a tolerance to in terms of their total meterage and their sprint volume and their high metabolic load distance and their change of directions. And, we don't have a ton of KPIs, but the ones that we have kind of distilled our efforts down to, we monitor them pretty closely, and we make sure that players are in the just right, or the Goldilocks sweet spot. We're never too little, never too much. We really view it as that bend don't break is really on the far side of the continuum, but we're also making sure that everybody's bent occasionally, right? So like if you're never sore, if you're never tired, that's just as much of a problem as someone that's on the fringe of breaking down, because now when you're called, if and when that time comes, you're inevitably going to break, or you're not going to be ready to handle what we require in match play. So it's a lot of number crunching. I've got uh, some great people helping me with some data. We're taking in more than ever right now. We're actually putting in. We just ordered team-wide Aura rings today. That's going to go into the algorithm, daily wellness tracking as a quasi quantitative addition to our subjective wellness scores. So just constantly looking at improving it. No one data stream is the end all and be all, but with them all working together, we really get a good feel for what individuals can handle, what they can tolerate. And sometimes we find that we certainly get it wrong occasionally, but we don't get it wrong for long, is what I'd say. We're not repeatedly wrong. We get wrong and then we recalibrate, and we usually get it right the next time.
Through that journey of getting to where you are, getting it more right than wrong, have you observed or any lessons you have, maybe not necessarily what to do, but maybe areas that are often overlooked or common pitfalls that you yourself have made or have seen others in the industry make when we talk about this season long periodization, bend, don't break?
I think this is changing, but I think that there are a lot of people that don't train hard enough. It could be for a variety of reasons. Sometimes the coach won't let them. Sometimes, you got a couple players that are too vocal and say that this is too much. But generally speaking, at least in my opinion, my observation, what has worked for us at least, is we train pretty hard year round. We don't really ever back off. Oftentimes we will have our biggest training loads of the year towards the second half of the season during match weeks. So there's a lot of coaches out there that still back off strength training from midway or preseason or midway through the season. I hear college fitness coaches talk about, oh, we only lift in the off season. Well, that means you're basically at your physical best during the least important match of the year, and when it comes to needing to be really strong and fast and fit, you've taken out a really huge component and probably detrained that component to such an extent that you might as well have never done it in the first place. We have a couple non-negotiables, which would be we're going to lift at least once a week, no matter what. We're going to sprint at least once a week, no matter what. And sometimes those go to 2 times a week, occasionally 3 times a week on a lift. We're going to hit a certain number of meterage by position. I'm pretty confident that we're on the upper end of the echelon, if not the very tip of it, at least in terms of what I've seen in the women's game. And it's just don't undertrain. Speak with confidence. Try to get by. You really got to educate and get buy-in with the players and the coaching staff. If you can get that, it really goes a long way. As I said, I'm well aware. I can't speak to being an expert in terms of like that, how you get that process or how you get that going. I was handed it to me in the first place, and then I've kind of had success, and that kind of beget the freedom and the leeway to continue with it. But in my experience, my limited experience working with one coach who was kind of resistant to it, my first coach with the courage, was that you just have to educate and stand your ground rather than back down, when they say, hey, we need to do this. And, some of that comes down to like how you speak to the coach, speak to the players. It's not throw a tantrum. It's not tell them they're wrong. It's, make them think the idea is theirs, educate, just kind of like be willing to put in the work in terms of a gradual investment in this long-term goal of changing the training culture. But it takes time, but I think buy-in. I think if you were to get buy-in, if you were to establish the culture, that's the only way you're gonna get that training. You look at little football teams, even from the youth level, American football teams. very hard nosed. They do it as part of their culture, but in soccer, it's much less part of the culture. In track and field, if you're like a middle distance runner or a long sprinter and you're not feeling like you're going to puke once or twice a week because you train so hard, you're something's probably wrong, right? That would feel abnormal for many of those populations. So it's just not part of much of the culture in our sport. But I think that is changing. I've seen such a massive change over the past couple of years where people are sprinting, people are lifting, people are training a little bit harder, people are taking less off days. And I think that's all a part of it. So people, we can handle an amazing amount of workload as long as we go back to what I was saying before, progressively overloaded over extended periods of time. If you just gradually increase the load over time, there's like no telling what someone could handle.
I'm really curious on this is kind of like a left field question. I'm just gonna throw it out there and see what happens here. I've seen over social and see across media platforms the investment that's going into preventative preventative care for ACL injuries, especially in the female athlete, as there's been a higher incidence in ACL injuries. Um, Two thoughts come to mind when I see this information. One, something that you just alluded to, not training hard enough or not doing enough. But then also the flip side, what you alluded to earlier in the conversation is the amount of tournaments and games that are being played for the women's sports now. So I'm really curious from those perspectives. I have my ideas of maybe it's not more research, maybe it's just reassessing the current state and reevaluating what's being done. When I throw that scenario out to you as far as just this kind of current state where we're at with the female athlete in terms of the high incidence of ACL injuries, what thoughts come to mind?
It's a really tricky one. There's clearly no solution that we know of right now. Despite the fact that we are pouring a lot of resources towards ACL preventative care, ACL research, a lot more needs to be done in women, of course. We're still seeing a big ACL tear every week. Midge Purse just had one last week. Takes her out for the season, of course. Our MVP, the MVP of the NWSL, had one at the end of last year. We, knock on wood, have had the research is clear on what you can expect, so to speak, of ACL tears in women per hours of play. We've been about 1/10 of that. I've tracked it over my 8 years. We've been about 1/10 of that. But last year we did have three. We had 3 last year, which is by far the most we've ever had. 2 were contact related. So it's kind of both the combination of having 3 as well as 2 contact related ones shows you like lightning's going to strike you no matter what. If I think we're doing a good job in terms of preventative care, I think you can never blame the sports science staff because it's so multifactorial. We do a lot of the stuff that they say you should do. So I think it kind of comes back to maybe what I think you were alluding to is that we're playing so many tournaments now on such short turnarounds in a population that is known to be have a higher predisposition to these catastrophic knee injuries that there's pretty much nothing you're going to do about it. The cost, so to speak, of having more matches on TV, having more league play, having inter-season tournaments, having post-season tournaments, having international camps, training camps, and tournaments that are longer and more frequent is going to mean that you're just jamming more stuff into the calendar and the likelihood for these injuries is going to go up. I don't know if there's another way around it. We saw a different type of injury manifest itself in the men's game post-COVID, right? When we returned from COVID. And that was maybe shows you like preparation, no matter what the injury is, preparation is going to help reduce it. And there's a good bit of research which says, hey, if you just get stronger, if you sprint more, if we know what the data says, the research say, if you do these things, you're going to reduce the likelihood for injury, but you're never going to eliminate it. People have tried menstrual tracking for women. No real no real causative effect there, or anything that you could act on. At least in my opinion, in my observation, I'd be glad for someone to show me otherwise. They have looked at a wide variety of things, and really the only things that I've seen are like, we've seen the ACLs go up in spite of preventative care also going up as the tournaments or the travel goes up as well. So, but then on the flip side of that, how do you have higher paid players? How do you have the women's game grow? How do you have, this expansion of the women's game if you don't have more opportunities to put it on TV, to sell tickets, to expose athletes to fans? So it's a double-edged sword, I think. In terms of our field, what can you do? I think it's relatively clear. I would like to think that most people in our position are doing what they should be done. Strength training, some plyometrics, focusing on mechanics, sprint regularly. At least as far as I'm aware, probably the biggest predictor for injury risk reduction is just simply get stronger. There's a handful of other things in there, but it's so multifactorial. But I don't know if you get around it with the increase in tournaments. Now you look at like World Cup, the Olympics. These we're adding. We're adding a Mexico versus NWSL tournament this year in season. We had that last couple of years. We had the Challenge Cup. All these things are like, we're just jamming so much in, and the people at the top and the players keep talking about player health, wellness, and safety. I mean, how are you going to do that when you're going to just keep putting them at a higher risk? There's no off season. Women aren't quite there, but there's the top men's teams are now at like 60 matches in a whole year, 60 matches in a year. So you're looking at, there's never an off week. There's no off season. You just keep cycling through these tournaments and matches. And, there's women that are kind of like that. There's women that leave the NWSL and go and play in Australia or go and play in the UK. So there's no off season to train, and without an opportunity to kind of like train without compete, then how do you fully prepare? That's one of the things is like so different in this world compared to my other world is like, you take Olympic sports and you're like, I trained for 4 freaking years, and really there's just one competition that matters. But you look at the very top of soccer and you're like, yeah, there's no real off season. We play 60. I think Palmeiras last year, a team that we've kind of worked with, Real Madrid, when they've been at their top, they play like 64, 65 games in a calendar year. Women's leagues are trending in that same direction. You're just not going to get around it. If the purpose of training is to prepare you for the competition, but you can't have a period of dedicated training, the risk is going to be high, no matter what.
I can speak from the NBA experience. The same problem exists. You're just trying to play so many games to generate revenue. There's always, I had one particular player educate me on for the Players Association. A lot of players would complain, hey, we don't want back-to-backs. Hey, we play too many games. And the question basically became down to, okay, that's cool, we can do that, but you're going to lose more money because we can't play enough games. There's not enough games. There's not enough revenue. If there's not enough revenue, then player salary cap has to go down. And the moment you start talking about taking away people's money, they're like, okay, I'll suck up and play back-to-backs. So to your point, like seeing the trend of European soccer going play. I mean, I remember seeing this past couple of weeks, seeing Mbappe, complain about the amount of games he's playing, talking about a player that's playing multiple tournaments for his club and country. And similar with this, saying that some of the international women's players that are playing for a women's national team in addition to the domestic leagues, it's just the volume goes up. So I appreciate your perspective on, hey, the training matters, but at some point we have to look at the bigger picture and understand maybe it's just an uphill battle and it's a necessary evil for the sake of growing the game and compensating players fairly.
Yeah, I think NBA is like a great example because obviously they play 82 games. They're flying all over the place with the luxury of charter jets and quick turnarounds and the best sports science staff and medical and hotels and all of that. But they still have a 6-month off season, 5-month at the very least, right? These guys are taking month-long vacations, 2-month-long vacations, and then getting back to training. That doesn't exist in the sport of soccer. It doesn't exist. Even if you're the worst team in NWSL and you're eliminated from play, you might go straight over to Australia or straight to the WSL and play. And if you're pretty good, you're also going to be playing internationally for your country as well. That just simply doesn't happen in the NBA. The NBA guys, even if it's the Olympic year, they're still getting some off time, you know. So it's just and the NBA thing has been known about for some time. They've got analysts working on like, hey, how do we sort this schedule out? How do we make sure there's minimal back-to-backs, or we're maximizing the efficiency of the travel and place the game schedule? And it's, you know, I'm sure something like that happens in the NWSL, but it's, you know, we've seen games with like 3-day turnaround, stuff like that. We've got teams on, we got girl with a junior national team right now, and they got 2 games in 3 days at the U20 level. And then she's going to come back. She played Saturday. She's going to play again in like two days. And then she's going to play again in another 2 days. You know, that's the kind of stuff that you see at, you know, U12 soccer. It's just absurd. And these are players who are bigger, faster, stronger. And it's, you know what you're going to get.
The U12 analogy is priceless. It's like it's almost like the bell curve of as you age. You're in a diaper at the early part of your age, and then you get back to a diaper at the end of your age. And it just sounds like what you just described is exactly. Well, Mike, you share some great stories. You come from a wealth of experience and knowledge. One thing we're always trying to do, that longevity and achieving high performance is something that the audience is always interested in doing. So one thing we try to do is just, you know, how we find our small wins day in, day out to just maintain a high performance lifestyle. So for you, how would you define a small win?
I would say consistency needs to be your anchor. Be consistent with, you know, how you take care of yourself, how you treat other people. When you get these small wins, if you can finish your day, go to bed at night and say, hey, did I do what I was supposed to do? You know, the outcomes may not always be there on the day, but if you're consistent about it and you're learning from your mistakes, then the long term will be the big wins. You know, so if you just follow the process, learn from your mistakes, be consistent with your disposition, with how you take care of yourself, with how you treat other people, everything else will fall into place.
I love that. You're not the first person to say that, and the consistency is king. You're right. Those small wins at the end of the day do roll up into something bigger in the long run. Um, hey, Mike, this was great. I want to be mindful of your time. We're about to just keep chatting to get you on in the future, or we're down in the Carolinas, just come chop it up. But most importantly, like I said, you are super knowledgeable. You run a great facility down in the athletic lab. You have some education platforms as well. How can people find out more information about you or connect with you as well?
I'm relatively active, or have resumed activity on Instagram at Mike Young PhD. No longer really use the other social platforms, but I do have some archive stuff on there. My training facility, where we always welcome visitors, is at Athletic Lab in Cary, North Carolina. We have a coaching academy where we put out a lot of content in terms of training load and periodization and sports science, Athletic Lab Coaching Academy, and then also involved with a project with long-term athletic development, LTAD Network, where we've just have a lot of great resources on there from great coaches from around the world who've contributed to this platform. We're just sharing information. So love to connect with people. LinkedIn, I've tried to be fairly active on at Mike Young PhD there as well. But yeah, it's great to be on, Adam, and great to reconnect after many, many years, and appreciate the podcast invite.
Absolutely, Mike. This was fun, and I'm glad we were able to carve out some time. So thanks for coming on today.
Thank you, man.